Hello, hello, everyone. Happy Wednesday. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. I don't know where you are in the world that you're watching this, but thank you for joining us today for another episode of the Event Hustler Show. My name is Liz King Caruso, and I love to do this podcast and talk to amazing people and really just catch up. This podcast, as I'm sure if you've watched in the past, it is kind of a good mix of business insights and trends, but at the same time, kind of that personal connection and catch up as well, which I think is really important. It's nice to know what other people are dealing with in the industry. And I really just enjoy these conversations. So today I am excited to introduce you guys to Jordan Goodfellow from GigStream, Gig Rents. You have a lot of things going on. We are just really going to catch up today. I want to learn, Jordan, a little bit more about you, what the last year has been like, what this year has been like, all of that good stuff. But first, hello. I want to just give you a warm hello first.
Well, thank you very much. I'm really glad to be here. Of course, you did my podcast, Gig Ready, a few months ago. And so looking forward to just continuing the conversation about how we can grow through the last 14 months and into the future and make ourselves plus our colleagues just better at what we do.
Yeah, I know that is such a focus of yours. And of course, it's a focus of mine, just kind of this education for the events industry, which I think is so great. Why don't you tell people a little bit more about you and your company and kind of what, not necessarily what you've been up to, but just kind of what you do now so that people can get, that, 10,000 foot view.
Got it. Well, the podcast isn't 2 hours long, so I'll try and slim it down. I started out in the touring industry many, many years ago. So 20 plus years ago. And I did rock and roll touring, weekend warrior, travel in the world. And then Gig Rent actually came out of an idea to create a company where what I call super freelancers could take their equipment and turn it into revenue when they're not either on the road or they are working on another job, but their equipment's just sitting and so we then started an equipment rental company, which was Gig Rent. And with my technical direction experience, we began to grow that into a full service AV company that serviced corporate concerts, anything that involves audiovisual equipment. It didn't really matter what type. We were just like, okay, who can we and how can we do a better job helping them? Yeah. And then through that whole process, we, growth upon growth upon growth, which was amazing. And then the pandemic hit, and it was just that punch in the face, the old saying from Mike Tyson that everybody's got a great plan until they get punched in the face. And and that's exactly what it was. And so we've really tried to move in different directions. And thankfully it's taken us about 12 months to really put a focus on that. I honestly, as an executive, as the guy running my company, was all over the place for a long time because it was just so out of sorts. We were just trying to figure out what's going to work, what's going to happen. And so we've instituted some new streaming platform products that we brought into the market because one of my team members was a developer and they came to me and they were like, hey, we can do this. This is something we can do and do well. And so we finally found that niche, but it took 12 months. It was not easy. And through that whole thing, trying to figure out as a company, who are we now? What has changed? What are we going to do differently going forward? And that's really been the process. So that's where we are. So we're a equipment rental and management company for live events. And we're also a streaming provider that does content delivery for virtual, hybrid, and streaming events.
Awesome. So tell me, there's that personal side I was talking about where we like to kind of like just dig in a little more in that space. So 2020 happens, you mentioned you're kind of all over the place. I mean, obviously that was devastating for the entire industry. Yeah. The AV industry, that rental piece, that's one piece that I felt especially bad for. Venues being another one where it's just kind of like, it's very hard to think of like, how do you pivot that into the, the event organizers? Not that we had it easy, but it was a little bit easier. You kind of have like some option. So Can you tell me just about like, it doesn't have to be the lowest moment, but kind of one of those low moments and how you got yourself through that? Because, I think a lot of people were very just crippled by what happened. and really couldn't come up with like, hey, why don't we launch GigStream and do all these great new things? They're just kind of frozen in that space, which I can't blame them, because I mean, that's pretty crazy. So how did you kind of, was it support system? Like, how'd you get out of that and kind of come up with these new ideas?
Well, we tried a lot of ideas before we got to this. I still have a disinfection company that we started that was going to be specifically focused on events, called Event Disinfect. We looked at doing a full run of outdoor drive-in theaters here in Denver for a while. And that was, we just kept running into brick walls on that. We looked at possibly starting a logistics and shipping company that would start doing shipments around the country. Found that was not as profitable as one might think without a ton of infrastructure. And so, I can't pinpoint a time when I think the lowest point, I guess, actually was only a few months ago in February, when I realized that I had to lay off a bunch of my staff, and I couldn't avoid it any longer. And in fact, I probably had gone 2 to 3 months longer than I should have, because I was just hopeful that we were going to see something just suddenly click and boom, everything just started ramping up again.
Yeah.
And for me, I've been working through a number of books over the last 3 to 4 months. And one of those books was basically talking about facing challenges that are incredibly difficult. And the book is called In a Pit with a Lion. And it's talking about when you purposely make the choice to do something very, very difficult, because that is what you've been preparing for the whole time. And, GigStream already existed, GigRent already existed. And we've been thrust into this situation where we had no choice. Zero. Like, there was no like, hey, I'm going to opt out. Hey, right. Can I go on vacation for the next, 3 months? And, my family and we took a break and we went on just a short little 5-day family getaway. And that was kind of the time of me reflecting and saying, okay, what needs to change? And then through that process, learning, all right, here's the moves we need to make. Here's the things we need to do. And all of those are still in process. But when we choose to face those things that are staring us down, that are the most difficult things that we have to do, whether they've been forced on us or not, we have one of two choices. We either look at it and stare it in the face and say, I'm coming for you, or we turn around and we walk the other way and hope it doesn't follow us. But here's the thing that you don't realize when you're staring at it, it's going to follow you and you're not going to get away from it.
Yeah.
And so, you might as well. Tim Grover, another book I'm in the midst of reading called, Tim Grover's a sports coach that coached Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant and stuff. And he's like, change has two things that you can do. You can either face it once and say, this is how it's going to be, or you're going to constantly face it every single day until you choose to understand that that's what's going to be no matter what. And so I'm going to go with the pick it once and move forward versus hope that it somehow is going to go away. And so that was like mid to late February for me. So right at kind of that 1 year mark. Yeah. But now all of a sudden we've turned, we're facing it and we're saying, okay, where are we going from here? The change is done, that we can't fix it. We can't do anything about it other than move with it. And maybe it took me longer than most people to kind of get to that point, but I'm really hopeful for the future and hopeful for where we're going to go.
Yeah, those monsters in the closet, they only get bigger. You kind of shove them in there, and if you don't deal with them, they just keep growing. But, I don't think you're alone, honestly. I think that a lot of people were feeling especially anxious, and all the pressure of the last year really this year. I think most people would expect that lowest moment to have been last March, March 15th, 2020.
Yeah.
But really, I mean, and this is the Event Hustler Show. We are hustlers. We're constantly figuring it out. And just like you said, you tried this, you tried that, you tried this other thing. And it's really when you get into that and you start to realize, well, this didn't work and that didn't work. And this is frustrating. And I don't like doing this, but it's something I can do. And, then you kind of get to this point where you're like, my gosh. And I've thought a lot about the industry. Like, people kind of make it through. Yeah. Whether you have savings or you're doing something innovative and trying something new, you make it to a certain point. And then it kind of like all hits you later. So I would not say at all that you're alone, and you're not alone today either. I see Tim is here. Tim, thank you so much for joining us. He says, good to see you with TECHSYTALK. Great work at GigStream. Tim, we have to have you on the podcast. So glad you're here today. So let's talk a little bit more about GigStream in particular. I know that's what's on your lower third. So we want to make sure we talk about that. That's obviously one of the things that came out of the 2020 transition for you. Yeah. I know you said that one of your team members came and said, this is something that we can do. So what exactly are you guys doing? How is it different than other things that are on the market? And how is it doing for you? Like, what do you see for the future?
It's been a slow burn. And just honestly, it's not, in my mind, when he came to me in August of last year, we had a client that came to us and said, hey, we need a new platform. We're not happy with what we're using right now. And here's what we need, X, Y, Z. And they kind of spelled it out. Yeah. And so Dave looked at me and he was like, dude, we can do this. And I know we can. And so he's like, I'll let you know when it's done. And so for like 2 weeks, he disappeared. I didn't get phone calls. I didn't get emails. I didn't get anything. And then 2 weeks later, he comes back and he says, hey, check this out. And so he had built up this full streaming platform from the ground up, not using anybody else's information. And it was a shell and a base to build off of. And so we said, okay, we've got the piece. Then we went to the client. We're like, hey, check it out. We built exactly what you wanted. And then they're like, well, no, that's not what we wanted. We wanted a new event website. Okay. We had hours of discussions talking about everything that they wanted. So from there, the customer went and they did their event website, and actually it's kind of funny because they've now come back to us to start looking at doing those events now that they've figured out what they're doing. But that was the shell. And then Dave said, well, what can we do with this? And how can we make it into something that is different? Because most companies, the focus, especially the big companies, we've seen all of these, the big boys that are getting all the money, they're getting these big investments, and I could list the number of different companies, and millions upon millions of dollars are flowing into these companies right now. And so it's really hard for us as a small, very startup stage, no funding it ourselves, to get traction against, these big companies that are behemoths that just pound the ground with hundreds of thousands of dollars of marketing. And so we're moving into a slightly different direction. And I think what we're going to do, we're focused more now on content delivery. So basically working within the confines of what people already do and delivering the content to them. But our content delivery network is slightly different in that we don't just do one stream. We focus a lot on multi-stream. So concerts. There's an online concert promoter and company that we're working with right now to create a whole experience called My Way, which is basically a multi-stream concert where people can pick and choose how they watch the show and what they see from their home. And then we're also working with some other sports promoters, and this is really the direction that we're headed right now. Is sports is great, but how can we make it better? And how can we bring other sports that might be kind of obscure or not mainstream into a light where people can actually enjoy them and watch them, and they don't have to be at the game? So there's some basketball promoters we're talking to right now who do college and high school basketball, that they want to get stuff online. And these are they're doing tournaments, they're doing all kinds of things like that. So we're looking at how can coaches watch more players more often, and not just be stuck on one camera, one screen. So we've got quad stream where we're sending 4 cameras, 4 switched feeds online so they can pick and choose what are they watching. Different people can come in and watch different parts of the game. If they want to watch a big wide shot and watch the game as if they're sitting in the stands versus somebody zooming in and watching, different people, they can get a different experience. And so our goal right now is moving away from strictly corporate, here's your one video screen with a chat box and you're polling and these other things, and saying, all right, how can we bring other events to the forefront and let people choose how they want to see those events. And so that's the adjustment that we've done, the change we've done to look at events differently, because there are tons of corporate based companies out there that are doing, great corporate events, and they're delivering great content and all that stuff. So instead of trying to compete with these guys that really we just won't be able to, we're going to shift to a completely different direction and find a niche that's going to work in other types of gigs, hence the name GigStream, because corporate events is not the only thing that there is there. And there are other underserved groups that I think could really benefit from our technology.
But honestly, I like that idea even for corporate, just this idea. Everyone's talking about hybrid, for example, and how you can't just put a camera in the back of the room and leave it, and that's your live stream for your virtual audience. That's not a virtual event. And the last year has really shown people that. Yeah. So really thinking about, this idea of people being able to like zone in on the experience they want, not just if there's concurrent sessions, choosing the session they want, but choosing, do they want to be in the front row? Do they want to be in the back row? Do they want to be hearing, supplemental content instead of the session content? Do they want to be networking? I've been talking a lot about this just in general in terms of engagement and letting people kind of choose how engaged they want to be. Yeah. I know I am like tired of being on video over the last year. It's like, how many more video calls can we have? But that's why Clubhouse, I think, is so popular, because it's audio only. I think that's really cool. I wanted to share this comment from Tim too. He says he agrees with you. Many of those investor funded ventures will also require high ROI, which can create a price opportunity where there are not millions of dollars expected.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Thanks, Tim. I appreciate that. We need to get lunch soon, by the way, buddy. It's been a while. Tim and I live in Denver, so it's been since we've seen each other. So I'm going to call him out now because I can.
This is the great thing about, virtual, right? Like there's so many people in New York who I don't really get to see, but sometimes I'll see them on the podcast or I'll see them on somebody else's stream. And it's like a closer connection than the fact that we physically live very close to each other and we don't see each other that often.
For sure. So you brought up, can I switch subjects on you real quick? You brought up Clubhouse, and I've been really, it's been on my mind for about a month, and I'm really curious, like, how are you using it? And are you really seeing some good traction there? Because I want to start doing some gig ready stuff over there. Because I think that giving people the ability to interact directly and ask questions and things, especially people who don't understand our industry, could be just a really cool way to provide some value for people. What are you seeing with it?
Yeah, so I like it. I think I'm one of those people, like I try everything new to see what the applications are to other things.
Yeah.
So, for me, Clubhouse, that's one of the things, is really thinking about that level of engagement. Like, I think people really like audio only. I think they like to choose whether they want to just hear the conversation or they want to be on stage as part of the conversation. Like our events, for example, are mostly sessions where I'm reaching to people, or they're roundtables, but we don't have a lot in the middle, you can just like choose that level. So that's something I've been thinking about. I think in general, they are getting a little bit of backlash that they have not been very supportive of creators in general. It's kind of like, if you're famous, then you happen to get enough, they call you back, they answer your email. But they've tried all kinds of new things. They started adding things like tipping. And I feel personally like they went the monetization route a little too fast, and it took it from what was like this great opportunity to just have really good conversations with amazing people. Yeah. The thing is, as you know, once you add the monetization, people just go crazy, and it's all about marketing, growing enough followers. And, that part was not so much fun to me. However, I've had some really good conversations on Clubhouse, and learn from really good people. It reminds me of the early days of Twitter, when you could just like tweet someone who was super famous and smart, and they would actually get back to you, and you could be in a conversation with them. And so I still use it for that. I think it's great. It's just, from from the standpoint of like building an audience, I think it's difficult. You have to
Okay.
really, I mean, there are people who like legit spend 18 hours a day on it.
Yeah, I've wanted to go on it way more often, and I'm like, every time I think about it, I'm like, I don't know how I would fit this into my schedule.
It's hard.
I don't know how I would make it work, and it's such a great idea. I love it. I mean,
Yeah.
that's why I started the podcast, was the ability to go audio. I think audio, as much as we love video, audio is. I think audio is actually has so much more reach than video does, even in the live event space. And I've been thinking a lot about how we can integrate more audio-based features into our platform so that people could listen or be a part of something on the go, or they could see, like, so there's a new type of podcasting. It's basically, they call it podcasting 2.0, which allows you to create chapter markers and put different like pieces of presentations, artwork, PowerPoints, and things like that within a podcast stream, but it still stays audio. And so give people the ability to see what's going on. Let's say it's a presentation you're doing and you're talking about it, and now suddenly you can give them the content and they can hear it, but they're not like eating the bandwidth on the video, and they don't have to be watching the video to be able to see it. And then they can even scan through the timing within the podcast to see what you're, the different content you're talking about. So that's something that's been on my mind on how to make things. I don't want to call it hybrid, but it gives ability to deliver content in a different way.
And I think that's important. The content from, let's say, a live event is so accessible. You can, and I think event professionals have been too obsessed with the fact that, like, if I have a session, you have to be sitting there on video watching me engage, not doing anything else. Otherwise, I'm failing as an organizer. But honestly, I mean, how much do we all listen to content in the background while we're doing 1,000 other things, and we learn a lot? And I think we're going to see that paired with much more interactive sessions, brainstorming, attendee led. I mean, that's definitely the way we're going for this year's TECHSYTALK Global. There's your content, but then there's, like, what do you want to talk about today, Jordan? It's not on the schedule. Let's just have a room and let's talk about it.
For sure.
And those conversations, I think, are oftentimes more powerful than the scripted speaker lineup and the perfect agenda. Yeah,
exactly. I love that, when I do our podcast, I'm like, here's some questions. We'll start with this, and we'll probably end up over here. And that's okay. Because people want that. They don't want the scripted. It's never fun anymore. It's like, we've gone over this 5 times. We've seen it. We've heard it. Let's find something new and find something different. And so, I think there's so much more growth that's there and available to us, versus just being video only, or, and like you said, oh, if you're not watching, we're not going to let you have the content. So I think you're 100% right there.
It's interesting. Yeah. I don't think I told you I was going to ask any of these questions so far. So we're rolling in the right direction here.
That's right.
So tell me more. Tell me more about 2021. You talked about kind of the last year and how you have a lot of hope for the future, even after, everything that has happened. What is it looking like, and what are you thinking for 2021?
Man, 2021 is going to be very interesting. It started off very slow. The first 2 months, 2.5 months of the year were kind of where are we going? Like, what's going to happen? Of course, with the vaccination efforts and all that stuff, as things have ramped up. And then all of a sudden, come mid-March, it was like click, and I'm getting phone calls and I'm getting emails. And, right now through the end of Q2, I feel as if it's going to be consistent. June seems a little slow right now. And I think in a standard corporate world, that's pretty typical. But then when we get into July, August, prepping for Q3, Q4, there's just lots of people are talking about, okay, once we get past that 50 to 60% vaccination point, and then I really think there's going to be a moment, and I can't pinpoint it, but it's the floodgates are going to open up, and all of a sudden everybody's going to want to do everything all at the same time. You know, I was looking at LinkedIn this morning, and one of the trucking companies that is well-known, you know, they've got 30, 40 trucks, and they're actually based out of Denver, Colorado. They are overbooked July through, I think he said, December 2021.
Wow.
They have, like, their trucks are completely booked, which means that their stuff, so if transportation is booked, that means that things are happening. And so I think that what we did in the first half of the year, I think we're going to be able to do 3 times that in the second half of the year. However, we're going to have to be cautious in that, because there has been a great decrease in labor within I've already seen events where, you know, a week ago, the show that we're loading in on Friday, he called me. He's like, "Hey dude, I need another video guy. Like, I can't find anybody." And so thankfully we had somebody on our staff that was available and able to do it. But I'm already seeing staffing shortages. I'm already seeing those things. And so we're going to have to be cautious of the number of events we take, because if we take too many, we're going to actually overwhelm and then also cause people to not be able to actually get the job done the way that it needs to get done, and done effectively. And we're gonna have to be careful not to burn ourselves out and burn those out around us, because it's the binge purge mentality. We went for a year and a half with almost nothing. And then all of a sudden it's like, whoa, we're doing all these events. It's amazing. Let's go. And then everyone's like back to back to back to back to back to back to back. And then everybody's worn out and everybody's tired. And then we're going to get to Christmas and everyone's going to collapse for like 2 weeks over Christmas and New Year's. But I think with some planning, we really can find the right business for everyone that wants to be in person or wants to be virtual. We can then space that in a way that makes sense for everyone. And, you know, I think that it'd be a good thing during this time frame that if the tendency is going to be to take on as much work as humanly possible. But I think if we've learned anything from like 2019, which was just an amazing year, and into the beginning of 2020, is that if we take a step back and look at what business is going to make the most sense for our companies, not just everything we can get our hands on, but what really makes sense to grow what we're looking to do, and maybe turn away a couple of things that it's like, well, you know, the profit margins on that weren't amazing for us because we had to do XYZ and this isn't in our lane. To really have a chance to restart what we did as an in-person company and get the things done, or get the jobs that make the most sense for us. So we really can, I guess, restart what we did and say, now we have the opportunity to go after and get the business that we really want and grow that. So I think that the end of the year, and then I've heard some just producers I've talked to, 2022, Q1, Q2, that the exact terminology that they used with me, and this is 2 different people that I know that work with very large Fortune 500 companies, was like, 2022 is going to be like the 1990s when they were just like blowing money out the water. And because it's been so long and they've got these budgets that maybe they've like, okay, we moved it into 2021. Now we got to push it, you know? And so we've got all this stuff, this money sitting here that hasn't been reallocated. We've got to do something with it. And so I could see that as a huge, you know, not blank checkbook, but definitely more freedom in terms of, you know, let's go all out. Let's do some great events, and let's really pull out all the stops for these people who have been working at home and working so hard to keep families and everything else in line, that then we can, you know, show them a great time and show them a lot of fun and show them that we appreciate the fact that they, you know, went through this pandemic and didn't complain and they worked their butts off and they got more productive. So it could be really cool.
Yeah, it's so exciting. I mean, I agree. It kind of went from like 0 to 100 really fast, even just in terms of capacity. Like we were locked down and then it's like 50, 75, 100%. You're like, okay. But you know, there's so much potential. I really like what you said about balancing it though, and being careful about how much we take on, not just for our sanity, but you know, the industry has changed dramatically over the past year. And so we really have to be aware of those staffing shortages that you talked about and just different dynamics in organizations. And, you know, we kind of got to feel our way back in and do it well.
And how much did we learn
Yeah.
from the time off, time with family? I mean, really learning what's important. We can't forget those things. We can't forget that, because sometimes we do. We get busy, we get active, and it's like, oh, I'll deal with that. You know, I'll do that. You know, my kid is only my kids are only going to be 7 and 10 once. And so I have to find that. And this isn't a, you should be a better parent. No, not at all. This is a, take what's important to you and prioritize that. And then once it's prioritized, everything else will work around it. You know, it's like, I want to be at my boys' baseball games, so I'm going to take that earlier flight home so that I can make sure I'm home in time to get to that game. And that might mean a little less sleep for me, but that's going to mean the world to my boys when, you know, I'm showing up for those games and things like that.
Yeah. But like you said, you have to carve that time out. It's not going to happen naturally. It's not going to, you know, what we just experienced for last year is not going to stay. And so, you know, we have to, like you said, figure out what are those things that are really important to us and make sure that they stay first and foremost when we start adding all this extra stuff back on.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah. Well, we're already out of time. I cannot believe it. These conversations are always so much fun. If people want to learn more about you, they want to, you also have a ton of educational resources, which we talked briefly about. Yeah. So where do you want people to kind of go to learn more about you and stay in touch with you and chat with you and all that good stuff?
Well, there's the Gig Ready podcast. So just Gig Ready, as it sounds, and that can be found. We're on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and Stitcher and all of those places. GigStream is, gigrent.com, but I think the easiest thing is just email jordan@gigrent.com. That's going to be the quickest, easiest, simplest. Shoot me an email, ask questions, let me know, hey, I want more stuff for my podcast too. So it's like, what do you want to hear about? What are some great positions and things that you want to learn more about? And then that way we can grow together and really turn this live events industry into a new thing, I think.
Yeah, that's so exciting. Well, thank you so much for your time today. Awesome.
You're welcome.
Chatting and catching up with you.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Liz. I hope you have a great day and enjoy the rest of your week.
Thank you. You too. And for everyone else, we will be back next Wednesday with another episode of the Event Hustler Show. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next week. Thanks, everyone.